On my wedding day, Marcus was late. Just as I was about to ask the guests to wait a bit longer, I saw floating text appear in midair. The side character never imagined that on her wedding day, with her childhood friend, male lead, he'd run off to get married to the White Moonlight female lead instead. The male lead really loves the female lead. Even though he has to marry the side character, he still gives the female lead the best sense of security. If it weren't for the male lead's grandfather saying, "Whoever marries the side character gets 20% of the company's shares," the male lead would never lower himself to be with her. Once he uses her to become the family heir, he'll use all the Johnson money to help the female lead's family through their bankruptcy crisis. So, what if the side character is his childhood friend? She's just a nouveau riche daughter. Does she really think the male lead would love her as if she's worthy? They think my family are nouveau riche. Then I'll just switch grooms and let the wedding proceed as planned. I want to see if an illegitimate son with no inheritance rights, and as soon-to-be bankrupt socialite, can still be happy together without money. The wedding march had already looped 4 times, and awkward silence filled the dressing room. My mom crumpled the golden embossed invitation. "Emma, should I have your dad go to the Wilson house to hurry them up? Marcus is usually such a good boy." I interrupted her, casually tracing the diamonds on my wedding dress with my fingertip. "Hurry them? For what? It's actually better if he doesn't come." My dad looked up sharply. "What's wrong with you? This is your wedding." The floating text rolled again. "Emma Johnson is just throwing a tantrum. Once the male lead comes back and sweet talks her, she'll definitely behave." Exactly. How could she really not get married? Last year on the side character's birthday, the male lead booked an entire amusement park for the female lead instead, and she still put up with it. That's the power of a life-saving debt. I lifted my eyelids as a blurry figure from 3 years ago flashed through my mind. The avalanche incident, Marcus's life-saving debt. I paid that back long ago. I got this illegitimate son onto the Wilson family registry, with inheritance rights. Even his current position as Wilson Corporation's vice president was an opportunity one begged old Mr. Wilson to give him. Did he really think he could hold that favor over me for life? Did he think the Johnson family money came from thin air, available for him and that socialite to squander? I removed the diamond ring from my finger and casually tossed it onto the vanity. "Mom, tell the officiant to change the music. Notify the guests that the wedding will proceed as planned, just with a different groom." My parents asked, in unison, who I opened my contacts and precisely found Nathan Wilson's name. After the 3rd ring, a deep voice answered with barely detectable laziness. "Emma." My voice was steady and calm. "Nathan, marry me now." Silence on the other end, and a soft laugh with a hint of self-mockery. "Are you sure? Miss Johnson seems to have forgotten that I gave up my inheritance rights 6 months ago." "Emma, I have nothing." I looked out the window at the swaying sycamore shadows. The sunlight was perfect, ideal for a wedding. Though this was an arranged marriage, I'd spent considerable money on this wedding. I'm a businesswoman, and I refuse to let money go to waste. Nathan was Marcus's older brother, the Wilson family's eldest son, handsome, scandal-free, with outstanding abilities and skills. Though I didn't know why he'd given up his inheritance rights, but it didn't matter. Given how much Grandfather Wilson adored me, plus my own capabilities, I was confident I could help him soar back to the top. Moreover, we'd grown up together. We knew each other inside and out. The marriage partner would still be from the Wilson family. This was simply the best choice. I curved my lips and called the makeup artist to touch up my look. "No problem, 10 minutes. See you at the main venue." After hanging up, the floating text exploded. Is the side character crazy? Marrying Nathan out of spite? He's a worthless, abandoned son. Does she think this will make Marcus come back? So naive. Marcus is probably figuring out how to handle her right now. Just wait. Soon enough, she'll be crying and begging Marcus for forgiveness. Really? I adjusted my veil in the mirror, cold smile playing at my lips. "Well, then let's wait and see." My parents hesitated slightly. I only said one thing, "Dad." "Mom, Nathan grew up under your watch, too. His character is solid. Or would you prefer I become the laughingstock of the entire city?" Hearing this, my parents immediately turned to make arrangements. In less than 5 minutes, Nathan came directly to the dressing room. He wore a sharp black suit, standing tall, though his face showed no expression. He radiated an aura of cold aloofness that kept others at bay, only showing slight emotion when he looked at me. Accompanying him was Nathan and Marcus's grandfather. Old Mr. Wilson leaned on his cane looking apologetic. "Emma, the Wilson family has wronged you. If you want to switch, I won't stop you. But have you thought this through? Nathan usually keeps everyone at arm's length, voluntarily gave up his inheritance rights, and barely involves himself in Wilson family affairs. Now, are you sure you want to choose him? I walked to Nathan's side, gently taking his arm, and looked up at old Mr. Wilson with determination. Grandfather, I know he gave up his inheritance rights, but that's in the past. I believe in his abilities and trust my choice. Besides, once he marries me, he won't be able to avoid Wilson Corporation, even if he wanted to. Isn't that exactly what you wished for? Old Mr. Wilson stared at me for half a minute, then suddenly burst into laughter. You've always had strong opinions, girl. This marriage was originally between you and Nathan. Anyway, let's do as you say. Hurry up and get ready. After old Mr. Wilson left, Nathan turned his head, his warm breath brushing my ear. Aren't you afraid that I'm also after the shares? I smiled. Afraid of? What better to give them to you than to that illegitimate son? Nathan smiled knowingly and adjusted my veil. I've already switched the groomsmen. I'll go greet the guests first. See you in a bit. News of the groom switch had already spread. The guests were all prominent figures in our circle. Though they gossiped, I maintained proper decorum. Still, as I walked toward Nathan, I heard a few snickers. Just wait. They'll definitely call this off. Emma loves Marcus so much. How could she marry Marcus's brother? Obviously trying to force Marcus to show up. Look, her eyes are red. She's been crying. The Johnson and Wilson families are really going along with Emma's tantrum, aren't they? Afraid of being laughed at? Nathan is excellent, but I heard his health had issues 3 years ago, which is why he gave up his heir status. Even if Emma wants to make Marcus jealous, she shouldn't choose someone with no competitive edge. I couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Love Marcus. That was just my deliberate act. Combined with Marcus's intentional showing off, an ambitious but incompetent illegitimate son was easier to manipulate. I instinctively looked toward Nathan in the distance. Ever since his mother died accidentally, and his father brought back Marcus and his mother, Nathan's position in the Wilson family became difficult. At that time, old Mr. Wilson was recovering abroad and couldn't help much. It wasn't until later, when Nathan's father died in a car accident, and old Mr. Wilson returned, that Nathan's situation improved, but that only lasted a short while. 3 years ago, I was in an avalanche accident and was unconscious for 3 months. When I woke up, I heard Nathan had gone abroad. I tried contacting him, but never got replies. He only returned 6 months ago. Before today, I actually hadn't seen him in a long time, but I trusted my choice. He would become an excellent ally and a sharp sword against Marcus. I'm not a kind person. If Marcus dared to humiliate me and make me a laughingstock, I would never let him off. The Wilson family wouldn't have a place for him anymore. Nathan took my hand and patted it gently. Sorry, we need to pause the wedding for a moment. I was confused, then watched him walk toward the guest tables, specifically the one where the whispering had been loudest. He gestured for his people to place several documents in front of those guests. Mrs. John, your husband's company's cash flow problems urgently need Johnson Corporation investment, right? I think we should withdraw this cooperation proposal. Mrs. Lee, about your daughter wanting an internship at Wilson Corporation. That's unnecessary. Wilson Corporation doesn't need people with poor character. Mr. Huang, the approval procedures for those plots of land under your name seem problematic. Already had. People submit them for reevaluation by the relevant departments. Those guests' faces turned deathly pale. Instantly, their earlier snickers vanished completely as they lowered their heads, not daring to speak. Nathan swept his gaze over the now silent guests, his voice not loud, but crystal clear. Anyone else want to question my wife's decision? Complete silence. Nathan walked back and took my hand, his fingertips cool but steady. You don't mind that I took a little time, do you? I suppressed my shock and curved my lips. How could I? Though I didn't understand why he was playing the fool, pretending to be an idle person, I had to admit I appreciated it. This move shut up quite a few people. For me, his methods were far more ruthless than Marcus's. Nathan nodded and looked at the efficient continue. Just then, the floating text suddenly scrolled frantically. The male lead is back. The side character's act is about to end. Ha ha ha. Emma, stop this nonsense right now. The heavy oak doors of the banquet hall crashed open. The floating text in my vision glowed a harsh, triumphant crimson. The male lead has arrived. Look at him, so imposing. Emma is going to drop that veil and run to him weeping. It's over for the disabled older brother. I didn't move an inch. I didn't even turn my head. Through the massive floral archway, Marcus strode down the aisle. He was out of breath, his tie loosened, an arrogant, impatient scowl plastered across his face. He looked exactly like a man who believed the world revolved around his whims. I heard the ridiculous stunt you're pulling, Marcus snapped, stopping a few feet away from the altar. He shot a look of absolute disdain at Nathan. Playing house with my crippled outcast of a brother to make me jealous? You've made your point, Emma. I'm here. Now tell the officiant to fix the paperwork and let's get this over with. Chloe was having a panic attack. I had to calm her down. A heavy silence descended upon the venue. The guests held their breath. I looked at Marcus, really looked at him. The man I had chased for years, the man I had foolishly believed was my savior. How had I ever been so blind? Before I could open my mouth, Nathan shifted. He didn't raise his voice, nor did he make any grand, dramatic gestures. He simply stepped halfway in front of me, shielding me from Marcus's view. Marcus. Nathan's voice was like ice cracking over a frozen lake. You are interrupting my wedding. Marcus scoffed, stepping closer. Your wedding? Don't flatter yourself, Nathan. She's only using you because she's throwing a temper tantrum. Move aside. Emma, come here. He reached his hand out to grab my wrist. He didn't even make it halfway. Nathan's hand shot out with blinding speed, gripping Marcus's forearm. I heard a sickening pop, followed instantly by Marcus's sharp gasp of pain. I won't say it again, Nathan murmured, his grip tightening until Marcus's knees visibly buckled. You are addressing your sister-in-law. Show some respect, or I will break this arm right here in front of God and everyone. The floating text above Marcus's head flickered violently. Wait, what? Nathan is supposed to be weak. Why is Marcus backing down? Security. Old Mr. Wilson's voice barked from the front row. The patriarch slammed his cane against the marble floor, his face purple with rage. Throw this disgraceful bastard out of my sight. Now. Grandpa. Marcus gasped, clutching his bruised arm as Nathan released him, tossing his hand away like dirty trash. She's my bride. You're letting her marry this ghost? She's a Johnson. Old Mr. Wilson sneered. And today, she becomes a true Wilson. You surrendered that privilege the moment you walked out of this hall for that bankrupt leech of a woman. Get out. Two burly security guards dragged a sputtering, furious Marcus out of the hall. The doors slammed shut. I looked up at Nathan. His jaw was clenched, his eyes dark with a protective fury that sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. Slowly, he turned back to me, the ice in his eyes melting instantly into something remarkably soft. Shall we continue, Mrs. Wilson? He asked, offering his arm. I smiled, a genuine, unbridled smile, and slipped my hand through his. We shall, Mr. Wilson. The officiant cleared his throat, and as we exchanged rings and vows, the floating text in my vision glitched into a frantic, chaotic mess of question marks before shattering into dust. The wedding reception was flawless. With Nathan by my side, no one dared whisper a single word of gossip. He navigated the elite circles with an effortless, predatory grace. He wasn't the sick, exiled heir they thought he was. He was a sleeping dragon they had foolishly mistaken for a corpse. By midnight, we arrived at Nathan's private estate. Not the flashy penthouse Marcus had demanded, but a sprawling, heavily guarded manor in the hills. In the master suite, I kicked off my heels, exhaling a long sigh. Nathan poured us 2 glasses of scotch and handed me one. You played your part perfectly today, I said, taking a sip. Thank you. I know this arrangement is sudden, but I promise, the 20% shares will be transferred to your name tomorrow. We can operate as business partners. Nathan took a slow sip of his drink, his dark eyes fixed on mine. Business partners. Yes. Unless you have other terms? He set his glass down, his gaze heavy. Emma, do you really think I married you for my grandfather's shares? Why else? I asked, genuinely curious. Nathan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he unbuttoned his cuffs, then slowly began to unbutton his dress shirt. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't an innocent teenager, but the raw masculinity radiating from him was intoxicating. But as the shirt slipped off his shoulders, my eyes widened in horror. Running down his left shoulder, crossing his sculpted chest, and wrapping around his ribs were massive, jagged scars. They were the kind of scars left by catastrophic trauma, crushing weight, and severe frostbite. My hands trembled as I set my glass down. I stepped closer, my fingers hovering millimeters above the scarred tissue. Nathan, what is this? 3 years ago, he said quietly, his voice a low rumble. You went skiing in Switzerland. An avalanche hit. My heart stopped. The life-saving debt. The only reason I had ever tolerated Marcus's arrogance. Marcus. I whispered, my voice shaking. Marcus dug me out. He carried me to the helicopter. Marcus, Nathan said, turning to look at me, was safely drinking hot cocoa in the lodge. When the avalanche hit, I was on the higher slope. I saw you go under. I dug for 2 hours with my bare hands, Emma. The secondary collapse hit just as I pulled you out. I shielded you. My ribs shattered, my lung was punctured, and my left side was severely frostbitten. Tears stung the corners of my eyes. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. You were sent abroad for medical treatment. I was in a coma for a month, Nathan corrected softly. When I woke up, Marcus had claimed the credit. My father had just brought him into the family, and they needed a heroic narrative to secure his position. They told you he saved you. And because I was fighting for my life in a sterile room in Germany, I couldn't tell you the truth. A wave of absolute nausea washed over me. I had dedicated 3 years of my life, my resources, and my dignity to repaying a debt to a man who had stolen the valor of the man standing before me. Why didn't you tell me when you came back 6 months ago? I asked, a tear finally slipping down my cheek. Nathan reached out, his callous thumb gently wiping the tear away. The touch sent a jolt of electricity straight to my core. Because you looked happy with him, Nathan whispered, his voice incredibly vulnerable. And I thought if you loved him, my truth would only break your heart. I gave up my inheritance because I couldn't bear to sit in the same boardroom as the man who stole you from me. I planned to stay in the shadows forever. He paused, a dark, dangerous smirk playing on his lips. But then you called me today. You asked me to marry you. And I realized, I am not a generous man, Emma. I am never letting you go. The floating text flickered briefly in the corner of my eye. Error. Error. Hidden plotline unlocked. The male lead's halo is deteriorating. I didn't care about the text anymore. I reached up, weaving my fingers into Nathan's hair, and pulled his face down to mine. Good. I breathed against his lips. Because I'm never letting you go either. Our kiss was a collision of 3 years of repressed longing. There was no business partnership left in that room. Only a husband and a wife, burning down the lies of the past. The next 2 weeks were a nightmare for Marcus, and a honeymoon for us. True to his word, Grandfather Wilson legally transferred the 20% shares to Nathan. Combined with my family's backing, Nathan walked into Wilson Corporation not as a discarded son, but as the majority shareholder. Marcus, meanwhile, had been stripped of his vice president title and relegated to a subsidiary project manager. One Tuesday afternoon, Nathan and I were sitting in his massive corner office. I was reviewing the financials for Chloe's family business, the White Moonlight's bankrupt empire. They're drowning, I noted, tossing the iPad onto Nathan's desk. Chloe's father owes $50 million to offshore creditors. They have until the end of the month. Nathan, typing flawlessly on his laptop, didn't even look up. Which means Marcus is going to do something stupid. Right on cue, Nathan's assistant knocked and entered. Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Wilson. Marcus has just authorized a massive transfer of funds from the South Bay subsidiary. He's masking it as an investment into a shell supply company. Nathan finally stopped typing. A cold, predatory smile touched his lips. He looked at me. Ready to go hunting, darling? Lead the way. We took the private elevator down to the subsidiary floor. The moment we stepped out, we could hear Marcus's voice echoing from the glass conference room. He was comforting Chloe, who was weeping delicately into a designer tissue. Don't worry, baby, Marcus was saying, stroking Chloe's hair. The $50 million is already routing through. I'll save your family. Emma and Nathan think they've won, but they're idiots. I control the South Bay accounts. Once your family's company recovers, we'll crush them. Oh, Marcus, you're so brilliant, Chloe sobbed, her eyes gleaming with greedy relief. I knew I was right to choose you. Are you sure about that? I pushed the glass door open. Marcus whipped around, his face draining of color. Chloe shrieked and hid behind him. What are you doing here? Marcus snarled, trying to cover his laptop screen. This is my department. Correction, Nathan said, stepping into the room, his hands casually tucked into his pockets. This was your department. As of 10 minutes ago, the board approved an emergency audit of all South Bay accounts. By me. Marcus sneered, regaining his false bravado. You're too late, Nathan. The transfer is done. The money is in the wind. Untraceable. I've already saved the woman I love. You can fire me, but you can't get the money back. The floating text suddenly appeared, flashing weakly. The male lead is so smart. He outsmarted the villains. I couldn't help it. I laughed. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was the mocking, condescending laugh of a billionaire who had just watched a toddler try to rob a bank. Nathan walked over to the projector, plugged his phone in, and mirrored his screen on the wall. Marcus, Nathan said, almost pitying him. Did you really think I spent 3 years abroad just recovering? What do you think I did with my free time? The screen lit up. It showed the registration documents for the exact shell company Marcus had just wired $50 million to. At the bottom of the document, the sole proprietor and CEO was listed as Nathaniel Wilson. Marcus's jaw dropped. Chloe gasped, stepping away from him. You own the shell company? Marcus stammered, his eyes bulging. I own the entire supply chain network you thought you were using to embezzle funds, Nathan stated coldly. You didn't wire $50 million into the wind, little brother. You wired it directly into my personal holding account, with a paper trail proving you stole it from Wilson Corporation. The color completely vanished from Marcus's face. He looked like a man who had just stepped on a landmine. "You set me up," he screamed. "I didn't do anything," Nathan replied, entirely unfazed. "I simply left the vault unlocked to see if you were a thief. And you are." I stepped forward, looking down at the pathetic man I had once thought I owed my life to. "The police are already in the lobby, Marcus." Grandfather Wilson pressed the charges himself. "Corporate fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. You're looking at 10 years in federal prison." "No, no, no, no." Marcus panicked. He grabbed Chloe's arm. "Chloe, tell them your father will pay it back. We just need a loan." Chloe violently yanked her arm out of his grasp. The sweet, fragile White Moonlight suddenly looked at him with sheer disgust. "Are you crazy?" Chloe snapped, her voice shrill. "You're a criminal. You have nothing. Why would I tie myself to a broke convict?" "Chloe," Marcus whispered, heartbroken. "I did this for you. You did it because you're an idiot," she spat. She grabbed her Hermes bag and ran for the door. "I have nothing to do with this. I was manipulated." As she sprinted out of the room, 2 uniformed police officers stepped in, blocking her briefly before moving directly to Marcus. Marcus fell to his knees. The arrogance, the pride, the male lead halo. It was all gone. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. Emma, please. We grew up together. I saved your life in the avalanche. You owe me. Please." I crouched down, bringing my face level with his. My voice was a lethal whisper. "Nathan was the one who dug me out of the snow, Marcus. He was the one who shattered his ribs while you drank hot cocoa. I know everything." The realization hit him like a physical blow. His eyes rolled back slightly, the shock completely breaking his mind. He had nothing left to leverage. No money, no power, no stolen glory. As the police hauled a sobbing, limp Marcus away in handcuffs, the floating text appeared one last time. It was pale, fragmented, and glitching violently. "Critical error. The male lead's aura has reached 0%. Plot collapsed. The side character has overridden the system. Erasing protocol." With a faint pop that only I could hear, the text vanished into thin air. I knew, with absolute certainty, that it would never return. The novel was dead. This was my reality now. A year later, the evening breeze off the Mediterranean was warm, carrying the scent of salt and blooming jasmine. I stood on the balcony of our villa in Monaco, a glass of champagne in my hand, listening to the faint sounds of the gala happening downstairs. Johnson Corporation and Wilson Corporation had officially merged, creating an unstoppable global monolith. The business world called us the Iron Couple. Chloe's family had gone utterly bankrupt. She was currently working as a hostess in a mid-tier nightclub, desperately trying to find a new rich heir, but her reputation was radioactive. Marcus was serving his sentence in a maximum security, white-collar prison. I hadn't thought about either of them in months. Strong arms wrapped around my waist from behind. A warm chest pressed against my back, and Nathan buried his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply. "Hiding from our own party, Mrs. Wilson," he murmured, pressing a soft kiss below my ear. Just taking a breather, I smiled, leaning back into his embrace. "The European board members are exhausting. Though, they are terrified of you." "As they should be," he chuckled, his hands resting gently over my stomach. "But I'm not the scary one. Everyone knows my wife is the real mastermind." I turned around in his arms, looping my hands around his neck. The scars on his shoulder were faintly visible beneath the collar of his open silk shirt, a constant reminder of the man who had truly bled for me. "Nathan," I said softly, looking up into those impossibly deep eyes. "Do you ever feel like we were meant to be someone else's stepping stones?" He raised an eyebrow, amused by the strange question. "Stepping stones? Emma, look around you. We own the stones. We own the path." He was right. The original story had tried to dictate my fate. It told me I was a side character, a wealthy fool meant to be discarded so the true lovers could shine. But fate is only a suggestion to those who lack the courage to rewrite it. "I love you," I said, the words ringing with absolute, unshakable truth. Nathan's eyes darkened with that familiar, possessive hunger. He pulled me flush against his body, his gaze dropping to my lips. "And I have loved you since the day I pulled you from the ice," he whispered fiercely. "You were never the side character in my life, Emma. You were always the only lead." He kissed me under the Monaco moonlight, and in that quiet, perfect moment, the world belonged entirely to us.